Hello, and welcome to the Penthouse Suites interviews at Charleston Conference 2014. I'm Jack Montgomery, Collection Services Coordinator at Western Kentucky University, and joining me today is my good colleague, Glenda Alvin, Assistant Director for Collection Management at Charleston, also a Charleston Conference Director at Tennessee State University in Nashville. And we're delighted today to welcome Cheryl LaGuardia, Research Librarian at Harvard University Library, Editor of Magazines for Libraries and Magazines for Libraries Update, and a Library Journal columnist and blogger. And welcome, Cheryl.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Well, you succeeded Bill Katz as the editor of the classic reviewing source Magazine for Libraries. What was it like following in the footsteps of Bill Katz?
It was a big responsibility. Bill was my advisor in library school.
Wow.
And I also took reference and serials from him. And I had worked on a number of chapters in Magazines for Libraries over the years, and I'd also referred a lot of chapter authors, potential chapter authors, to Bill over the years. So when he decided to step down, he got in touch with me and asked me if I would be interested. And of course I was extraordinarily honored. And then, of course, I was petrified because I would be following in the footsteps of a legend like Bill Katz. But he convinced me that I was the one he wanted to do it, and I figured that gave me a responsibility and a mission. So that's what I've been doing, trying to continue the unique resource that Bill created in 1969.
What advice would you give to young librarians starting out in the profession who wanted to write and to publish?
Starting by reviewing is a very good way to begin, because once you've got a body of work like that to refer someone to, it gives them confidence in you, especially if whatever publication and whatever editor you're working with can say good things about you, like you meet deadlines, which is huge. And of course, with most writing, it's a balance between getting someone who can write creatively and put a spark in it, but also somebody who doesn't need extensive editing. And reviewing is a wonderful way to begin that. And I will put a plug in here because it's how I got my start, and that is doing a chapter in Magazines for Libraries is a terrific way to get started. And I'm happy to say that there are a number of librarians who have written for Magazines for Libraries over the years, including the present president of ALA. So I've been able to work with some fascinating people, a lot of them just entering the profession, but it's put some experience under their belts. And then if I get a call from someone saying, I'm thinking of asking so-and-so to do such and such, how did they work for you with this? I can say, oh, this person met the deadlines, very thoughtful work, well written, etc. And I do get quite a number of requests from authors along the way for recommendations, for tenure decisions, things like that. So it's a nice writing experience.
How would one apply to write for Magazines for Libraries?
Get in touch with me. C. LaGuardia at fas.harvard.edu. It's on the web. People get in touch with me, and I generally have a dialogue with them. That's one way. Another way is if very often a current author will get in touch with me and say, we've got this newer librarian who wants to get some writing and publishing experience. And so I get the name and get in touch. And yeah.
It's interesting you bring that up. We're still largely a word-of-mouth culture
We are.
in terms of recommending and moving your career onward. So it's
Yes.
very important to be involved in something like this.
I agree. You know, the general idea is 6 degrees of separation in our culture. In library culture, I think it's more like 2 to 3 degrees of separation, because usually within just 2 or 3 steps, somebody knows somebody who knows you. And that's both a blessing and a curse, because it's a blessing if you maintain a really high standard of professional conduct, and it's a curse if you don't. And unfortunately, I think that the web has lured some folks to do some things a little more casually than they might have wanted to if their professional reputation was going to be connected to what they might have said or done. I see that I think there's a big line between how you present yourself personally and how you present yourself professionally. But when someone is using their professional identity to express something that is off in some way, I think that can count against them. And I think it happens much more now because so much is easily published on the web. So someone might not be quite as thoughtful as they would have been at one time before they put something up or out there.
And we had a young librarian who was doing a lot of intensely personal postings on Facebook.
Yeah.
And a number of us took her aside and said, look,
Yes.
this is not a good idea
Yeah.
to go this route. People are looking at your Facebook page
Yes.
as an indication of your personality.
Yes.
And I don't think this person was quite aware of it. They just didn't seem to cognize that this will have an impact.
And that was very kind of you to do that, because without having someone taking them aside like that, they could have continued for yonks and could have really damaged themselves very inadvertently. And
Well,
that's the shame.
It did. The damage was done.
Yeah,
And
that's too
I
bad.
did a reference, and someone brought up the Facebook stuff.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, ooh, we didn't get this shut down quick enough.
It can happen quickly, and I think that when I'm looking at something, when we're about to interview somebody, I will look them up on the web, because I figure it's fair game. And so I'll look at the pattern of how they communicate online. And of course, I'm looking for respectful, collaborative, and constructive material, and not something that is overly negative or critical in ways that are inappropriate. And sometimes I find some surprising things, and that's unfortunate. Yeah.
Well, back onto another subject.
Sure.
You and Progress have just relaunched the magazine, as we mentioned earlier, Magazines for Libraries Update. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Before, we were doing a free Magazines for Libraries update quarterly, and we only reviewed about 8 to 10 magazines a quarter, and we did the reviews and then sent them to ProQuest, and they eventually got loaded online. Now it is really a blog, and we're aiming to do at least 6 to 8 titles a month, so increasing the number of titles a lot. And my goal is to cover a lot of the titles that wouldn't otherwise get covered in Magazines for Libraries necessarily, because there's a lot of open access material now that's coming out that has really gained in quality and in prominence in one respect, but I don't know that it's sufficiently prominent with libraries as in bringing it to the attention of librarians who can then be bringing it to the attention of their faculty and graduate students. And just in the short time that we've been doing the new update, I'm finding amazing things that are now available, and it's open access, which makes a huge difference. I was talking with somebody yesterday from one of the large public universities in New York State, and he's a very high administrator, but his first priority was thinking in terms of the students that can't afford the material that they absolutely need for their courses. And I told him how thrilled I was that this was uppermost in his mind and that he was thinking in this way. And that's what I'm trying to think about now in terms of Magazines for Libraries Update, because making those open access titles more well-known and bringing them to greater prominence and recommending them.
Right.
Number one, having a recommendation in print or in virtual print helps people in terms of selection, but it also helps people in terms of just the knowledge that this is something that they will very well want to consider. And I've come across a couple of titles recently that I think really will become core titles before long. So that's pretty exciting.
It's like the old perception of self-published books. The original perception was that they were worthless by and
Exactly.
large, and a lot of them were and still are.
Surely.
But there is just as many that are of an exceptional quality, and we just can't blanket ignore them anymore.
And it's interesting because it's one of the things I've been hearing a lot about at this conference. And I've been hearing much more about it at this conference than anywhere else. That and collaboration. I just ran into a former colleague who's now at Yale down in the corridor coming up here. And she was talking about various collaborations that she's working on. And it's kind of a leitmotif of this year's conference, being earnest and collaborative, I guess.
Having been a librarian and in acquisitions for over 30 years, Magazines for Library has always been a standard tool of the profession. So I'm wondering, what is the future of the print version? And will the online edition eventually replace the print? Or will the online and print versions complement each other?
For the foreseeable future, the last option that you described as far as the print and the online complementing each other, with the print continuing to identify core collections and then the online complementing and supplementing it with both open access titles and then the niche titles that might never show up in Magazines for Libraries, but that are important for subject librarians or people collecting across the disciplines as well. So for the foreseeable future, I think we'll see them complementing each other. We haven't found a way yet to completely switch print over, and I'm not sure that the time has come yet to discontinue a print. I know that there was a lot of discussion this morning at the panel about is print reference dead, and I know that some folks think it is. From what I'm hearing, especially publishers, the number of publishers who get in touch with us wanting their magazines featured in Magazines for Libraries, I think that it's definitely a viable resource in print. It continues to be, because it does something that nobody else really does. It was Bill's brainwave. He was a genius.
I noticed our catalog has a 2011. I'm ordering the 2013. Will it be issued every 2 years?
It's issued every year.
Every year.
We do updating every year. We don't update every single thing, but we do update the entire volume every year with cessations, et cetera, new material.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
You know, another trend at this conference has been the whole open access.
Uh-huh.
And with open access really challenging the traditional serials model, how do you see serials publishing evolving in response to this over the next few years?
Well, I think that the bottom line is going to influence a lot of this. And the bottom line for so many libraries is they simply don't have the money they used to for publications. And I think that a lot of it is going to continue to be what the market will bear. And if prices get to such a level that no one can purchase something, then it's a moot point whether something is published or not. And I'm not suggesting that traditional serials publishing is going to go away, but I can see open access gaining in credibility and prominence, certainly in the academy. My concern is actually for public libraries in terms of open access, because so much of what you see that's being published as open access material is for the academy, which is lovely, but public libraries are struggling more than ever. School libraries are incredibly underfunded, and I'm hoping that as open access gets to be more of an accepted, credible, substantial practice, that we're going to see more titles be published that will appeal and can serve school libraries and public libraries especially.
Okay. So that also defines what role the libraries are. What do you think we should be doing to help this along?
I think that we should be encouraging open access. I think we should be talking with publishers about what value their publications have for our users and what public value they don't have. I'm still concerned about the big packages and how they serve us and how they don't serve us, and paying for things we don't need, because the days when we had the money, when anyone had the money to be able to afford and justify getting a lot of material that our users don't need, are gone. And I think that we're going to have to see more cherry picking available in whatever packages are offered. And I think that that whole concept is going to have to change drastically. And I think that as librarians, we need to be playing a role in convincing publishers that this needs to be done and helping make it a reality. And that could mean developing ways of creating the cherry picking, but certainly getting the message across. I think that from talking to, this is one of the things I love about this conference, you can get to publishers and vendors so easily. I had an in-depth conversation with a publisher, someone who publishes a lot of e-resources, yesterday. Unlike a discussion I've had with a publisher or a vendor in years, and getting really down to nitty-gritty. And we were both talking about our needs, and it was a discussion, it wasn't any kind of an argument, because we were exchanging our points of view, but she was telling me about some of the realities facing her. I was telling her about some of the realities facing us. And I think that we came away after that dialogue, both of us, with some new ideas on the kinds of things that we ought to be doing. So, well, that remains to be seen. But
I also think we do have a bit of a job left with the academy.
yes.
I know we're hosting several new journals on our institutional repository.
Yeah.
But there again, you still will run into groups of academicians who almost push back at the idea of anything open access.
Yeah. Well,
And I don't know yet how to work with those people.
impact factors, somehow increasing impact factors for some online journals. One of the things that I've noted in going through a number of the open access titles recently has been the advisory groups, more and more senior faculty on them, which to me shows a turning point. Because in the beginning it was mostly newbies,
Yes.
or even mostly graduate students, which was great because they were getting experience.
Sure.
But when we're talking about the impact on the academy, when senior faculty start giving their name to the publication, that provides the gravitas that is needed to encourage other experts, other well-known scholars to contribute to that journal. And once they do that, the impact factors will shoot up. And I think that that's where we're going to see a real shift in the serial publishing.
I think also time will take care of some of this.
Yes. I think you're right, and I think that it's going to do it in a couple ways, because I think that in some cases, the journals that don't really have the rigorous scholarship will fall by the wayside. Whereas the things that really are being published with substance from serious scholarship are going to be taking more of a leadership role.
I agree.
Yeah. Right.
Obviously, sources like magazines for libraries keep librarians informed about new resources, but how can librarians help the scholarly community stay informed?
That's really interesting to me, especially because this summer I was at a meeting with a number of people from Harvard, MIT, UC Berkeley, and a number of different online resources trying to discuss that question specifically, because the knowledge comes out so quickly and then it seems to be evanescent, and then it may reassert itself. For instance, I didn't know about the Road directory of open access until Katina mentioned it to me. And it has opened a whole new vista for me in terms of the Magazines for Libraries update. Some of that can be passed on through liaison relationships, but I think that the other thing we as librarians can be doing is developing more resources, like the DIRT directory, more kind of SDI services for faculty that are being created constantly, and bringing their attention to them. Because most of the time, I was fascinated in this conversation when somebody said, an academic who was not a librarian, said, well, he didn't realize that librarians had this kind of information, but he'd attended an event at his institution and discovered the whole spectrum of things that the librarians were offering, and suddenly they came to the forefront as people able to provide him with information about his discipline, not just general material. And he was shocked to find that out. And to me, that says we need to be doing a better job of communicating with the faculty. And part of that is finding out what the effective ways are to communicate with them, because that not only obviously varies from institution to institution, it varies from department to department.
It's true. It's absolutely true. It's some departments I find are very open to it.
Yeah.
Some are just, I mean, it's like, it's an immediate shutdown.
Yes.
But I think that that's going to change, because younger faculty are coming on, and I think they will force the door open.
I agree with you. Yeah. I think that the people who are using these tools as graduate students
Yes.
are taking it for granted that they're going to use them in their continuing scholarship.
And the minute you see an open access journal in a tenure portfolio, it has achieved a certain legitimacy.
Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
In one of your recent blog posts in LJ, you talked about the role of some librarians are playing to keep faculty up to date. We were just talking about that with information on such tools as Zotero and Mendeley.
Right.
Can you fill us in on what's happening there?
Well, we're doing a lot of workshops at my institution on Mendeley, Zotero, EndNote, and RefWorks, and making people aware of them, and also teaching their use. And so far, and this came out in that conversation about connecting researchers as well, what we're finding is a lot of the scholars would like us to do the comparisons for them and recommend which one might suit their needs best. We have a LibGuide now that has a comparison chart on it that says, okay, Mendeley does this, EndNote does this, RefWorks does this, Zotero does this. And so, again, they can pick and choose what it is that's important to them and then choose the tool based on that. And I was surprised because, of course, being information people, we want to give everybody the options. We want to give them as much information as possible. But from the perspective of the scholar who just wants the tool, and they want the tool that's going to serve them best, then getting a recommendation based on a dialogue that you have with someone and say, well, this is what's important to me, and this is how I work. And then you might say, well, Mendeley is what you need, or Zotero, or whatever. And that was an eye-opener for me, that they wanted us, at least in the discussion among the group of us, we were hearing from a number of people who said they were learning that the faculty were looking to the librarians to help recommend specific tools, which makes me very happy because I think that's a logical part of what we do best.
I agree.
Yeah.
It presents an awesome opportunities
Yes.
for those willing to reach out and
Exactly.
make them work.
Yes. Yeah.
I think it's an excellent idea to put it into a LibGuide.
Yes.
Yep. I should admit my bias. I love LibGuides. I love LibGuides. I love LibGuides. So I should put that out there.
From your experience assisting at the Widener Library Information Desk, what do today's students expect from library collections?
The students that I'm working with, they're looking in the journal literature. They want full text online. The most puzzling thing to me was finding that they still want most of the books in print. And I've been doing some focus groups, quite a few focus groups with students of late. And I was dumbfounded because I'm asking the questions trying not to set them up. So I'm saying dispassionately, if you had a choice, would you prefer to use print or online for this particular purpose? Textbooks. They wanted their textbooks in print. And I realized that it's possible that we're evolving into an economy where that may no longer even be feasible. But in terms of what they were asking for, they wanted the textbooks in print. And the thing that really knocked my socks off was students in the sciences were saying they wanted their textbooks in print. Because I know that a lot of the current wisdom is that in the sciences, everything electronic. So that came as a surprise to me. They definitely wanted the full text articles. They love the full text articles online. But when it came to certain materials, certainly textbooks, and anything that they have to read for real content, they wanted the print.
We discovered that because our institution implemented a new initiative where they supplied the general ed textbooks electronically, and and they supplied the readers to the freshmen.
And what happened?
They came to the library and printed chapters of the book.
I love it.
And our printers started jamming and breaking because there was such an overload of printing.
And this was freshmen.
These were freshmen.
So these are born digital folk.
I think
That's fascinating.
we-
Are you going to, excuse me, just one, are you going to write that up?
you should.
I hope.
Now that you
should.
mention it,
I hope you will.
Yes.
Sorry, yes, sorry, yeah.
We've done the same thing.
Yeah,
And in fact, I was talking to another librarian who's did exactly what their printers have just gone off the scale, and the freshmen are coming in to print out the electronic books. And I read a report of a study. I'm always, being a psychology major, I was always interested in how people perceive things and how they interact with visual stimuli. And the study, I believe that came out of Canada, said that we interact with a paper source in a different way than we interact with an online source. And even a digital generation person becomes more focused upon a print page than they do on. Now this may change as time goes on, I don't know. But it was very interesting, and this is over 70% of these students still wanted a print textbook.
Yeah.
Now for light reading,
yeah,
casual novels or
Yep.
fun reading, they were fine with the Kindles and all of that, but
Yeah.
they still, for things they needed to delve into.
Yeah.
And it has to do also
Yes.
with the turning back and
Yes.
forth between graphs and charts.
yeah,
Or even if you're reading I love history, and I want to go and I want to look at that picture in the middle, in
Yep.
that plate, and then flip back to the chapter.
yeah.
And that's a little more difficult with the electronic text.
But even if you tell them, you can highlight it in the e-reader, they still prefer to
Yeah.
highlight it with their yellow
With their,
Yeah.
on the print.
And these students in the focus group were talking about that. They even talked about the act of turning the pages, and smelling the book. And I haven't heard yet where anybody has developed a virtual smell-o-vision that can recreate that smell. And I know that as librarians, we are sometimes not happy to think about the smell, especially if it means the book is degrading. But the smell is full of emotion
yes.
for so many folks. And I think that all of that does play into the learning process. So,
It may signal the brain it's time to focus.
yeah,
It may be just that simple.
yeah. It's funny you say that because I did a focus group just a week and a half ago with some students who actually work for the library. And one of the things that several of them said was, when I come into the library and sit amid the books, it ups my game. It's serious. I'm there to really do serious work. And they've described how being surrounded by the books keeps them focused and puts them into a certain mindset.
Think about when you walk into a church and you smell the incense
Sure.
and you smell the candles.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you find yourself, you've gone quiet
Yes.
and you're meditative.
Yes.
And none of those were visual in symbols,
No.
but they were signals that came into your brain very quietly, very almost subconsciously.
Yes.
And saying that's exactly what you're
Absolutely.
describing.
It's true. It's true.
So we need smell-o-vision for books.
Smell-o-vision, yeah, and even then, I'm not sure if they develop smell-o-vision. Of course, the nice thing about smell-o-vision, if they developed it, would be that there would be options. So you could probably choose, brand new books or 16th century manuscripts or something, but it's still not going to be the visceral reaction.
Well, I think the current textbook model, and I think you might agree with me, is
Yes.
unsustainable.
I am worried about that.
When the lady this morning made the comment that a lot of students were not signing up for classes because they could not afford
Yes.
the price of the textbook,
Yes.
that shocked me to my core.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, this is terrible. We need to find an option for this.
Well, that's why our institution went to getting the books in electronic format, because the president realized that there was a great number of students who were never buying the textbook, and that in part was responsible for the lack of student success, because they didn't have the textbook for the classes.
Right.
So this was an effort to supply it to them at a reasonable price and help them graduate.
Mm-hmm.
In this focus group that I did a week and a half ago with one of the students who works for us, she'd signed up for a course, and she was very triumphant because she had been able to get all the textbooks from the library. Now, we don't generally buy textbooks per se, so I'm assuming these may have been in a literature course, something else. But students on scholarship, students around the world who can afford the prices. If you're taking a full load of classes, who can afford to buy
You're
all
right.
those textbooks for one term's use? I'm very worried about the number of people that are not going to be able to go to school because of all these different financial implications. And I think that publishing and the libraries do have a big role in that.
And I was also thinking, this is an ideal time to talk to the development office and bring them in to try and solicit support for students being able to buy their books
Yes.
from donors who want to give money, targeted money.
That's an excellent idea. And what a lovely, when you're thinking of naming a fund, that I would think that would be very appealing to donors.
And, I would even do it myself, so that someone, I remember struggling with the
Yes.
cost of books.
Oh, yes. Well, and depending on the limits they set, that could really be a kind of grassroots way of getting that kind of funding, because as you say, someone like us could help at least. Yeah, that's a great idea. You gonna write it up?
Yeah,
Good.
I just might. Well, thank you, Cheryl. This has been
Thank you.
wonderful.
Oh.
I've got one more question.
Sure.
What question have we not asked you that you would ask yourself?
You haven't asked me what I think Bill would be making of the current environment in libraries. And based on taking the classes from him that I did, I think he would be thrilled, because I see, and I'm pretty sure he would see, the role we play as extraordinarily important in the lives of students, in the lives of the public, in the lives of scholars. When I got here the other day, I ate down at Justine's Kitchen, and the owner came up and said, "Are you here for the library conference?" Because, they can always tell. And I said, yes. She says, "Well, you'll be glad to know that recent votes have supported the libraries here."
That's true.
So she was, absolutely, she was very up about that, and that made me feel good.
They're actually going to build
because-
some new libraries, which is amazing.
Yes, and obviously she's involved in the community, but to have somebody volunteer that made me feel good. And Bill started out in public libraries, and he always kept touch with that. And one of the biggest reference source that he recommended to us in school at that time, keep in mind it was how many years ago, was the Manhattan Yellow Pages. Because at that time, it was a superb resource. Now, of course, he'd be surfing websites and collecting them. I think he would be thrilled to see open access really burgeoning as it is. So that's the only question that, it's kind of a question that's in my mind all the time, because I'm not, it's in no way lip service about feeling a responsibility that Bill came to me and asked me to continue editing that reference resource. I really do feel it's a responsibility, and I want to keep it to the standards that he set, which were very high. So,
Thank you, Cheryl.
thank you very much. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. And thank you.